Today, history grows quieter, for American lives each marked by service, courage, creativity, and conviction have come to an end, their paths never crossed. Yet their legacies now share the same moment of remembrance. One shaped a state through decades of leadership. One stood on the deck as history erupted into war. One carried the truth from battlefields to the world. And one transformed fabric into identity, style into memory. These were not just names and headlines. They were witnesses, builders, storytellers, and visionaries. Their work reached beyond their time, leaving imprints on democracy, freedom, culture, and truth itself. Tonight, we pause not to mourn what is gone but to honor what remains. This is a tribute to 4 legendary Americans we lost today, and the legacies they leave behind. The news arrived quietly, confirmed in the early hours of the day. James Baxter Hunt Jr., a man whose life had been closely tied to the future of North Carolina, had passed away at the age of 88. For many across the state and far beyond, the loss felt personal. His voice, steady and reassuring for decades, had fallen silent. James Baxter Hunt Jr. was never the loudest figure in American politics. He did not chase headlines or thrive on conflict. Instead, he became known for something rare: consistency, a belief that progress was built slowly, carefully, and with patience. Over 4 terms as governor, he shaped North Carolina through change that was sometimes uncomfortable, often debated, but always aimed toward tomorrow. Born on May 16, 1937, Hunt grew up with a deep understanding of rural life and community. He learned early that opportunity was not evenly distributed and that government, when guided with care, could help close that gap. Those lessons followed him into public service and stayed with him throughout his long career. When he first became governor in 1977, North Carolina was at a crossroads. The economy was shifting, education systems were under pressure, communities were divided by geography, income, and access. Hunt entered office with a calm confidence, focused less on ideology and more on outcomes. He spoke often about schools, teachers, and students, returning again and again to the idea that education was the foundation of everything else. During his first 2 terms, Hunt pushed for investments that would not pay off overnight. He supported early childhood education, teacher training, and university research. Critics sometimes questioned the cost. Supporters saw the vision years later. Many would point to those decisions as turning points that helped transform the state's economy and workforce. After leaving office in 1985, Hunt did not step away from public life. He remained engaged, thoughtful, and observant, watching as the nation changed around him. When he returned to the governor's office in 1993, the challenges were different. But his approach remained the same: listen first, plan carefully, think long-term. Those years were marked by rapid growth and new pressures. Technology was reshaping industries. Cities expanded while rural areas worried about being left behind. Hunt worked to balance these realities, often choosing compromise over confrontation. He believed progress did not require winners and losers, but shared responsibility. Colleagues often described him as patient. One former advisor reflected, Governor Hunt never rushed a decision just to look decisive. He wanted it right, not fast. That mindset defined his leadership style. Meetings were measured. Conversations were deliberate. Even disagreements were handled with respect. Beyond policy, Hunt was deeply aware of the human side of leadership. He visited classrooms, spoke with teachers, and listened to families. He understood that statistics represented real lives. That understanding shaped his tone and his priorities. As his 4th term came to an end in 2001, Hunt left behind a state that looked different from the one he first led. Education systems were stronger, research institutions had grown, North Carolina had become more connected to the global economy, while still holding on to its local roots. Yet his influence did not end with his time in office. Hunt continued to mentor young leaders, offer guidance, and support civic engagement. He believed democracy was something that required constant care. Voting, participation, and informed discussion mattered deeply to him. His commitment to public service was reflected in his family as well. His daughter, Rachel Hunt, followed a path of leadership, eventually becoming Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina. To many, this felt like a continuation of values rather than a continuation of power. Service passed down, not authority. Rachel Hunt once said, "My father believed leadership was about listening, even when it was hard." That belief shaped not only his career, but his legacy. He taught by example, showing that steady work, done over time, could shape a future others would inherit. James Baxter Hunt Jr. passed away on December 18, 2025. The announcement prompted messages from across the political spectrum. Former opponents spoke with respect. Educators shared memories of his support. Citizens recalled moments when his decisions touched their lives. One longtime teacher wrote online, "Because of Governor Hunt, my classroom had resources we never would have had. He believed in us when it mattered." Another message read simply, "He made politics feel human." Those reflections captured something essential about his life. Hunt understood that leadership was not about being remembered, but about leaving things better than they were found. His success was measured not in applause, but in outcomes that unfolded over decades. In an era often defined by division, Hunt's career stood as a reminder of a different approach. He worked across party lines, he valued expertise, he respected institutions, while also pushing them to improve. His faith in gradual progress never wavered, even when the path forward was uncertain. As the state pauses to reflect, his absence feels like the closing of a chapter. A long chapter, written carefully, line by line, yet the story he helped shape continues. In schools filled with students, in communities strengthened by opportunity, in leaders guided by patience rather than noise, James Baxter Hunt Jr. will be remembered as a governor who believed deeply in tomorrow, a man who understood that the future is built quietly, through trust, effort, and time. His legacy lives not only in history books, but in the everyday lives shaped by his vision. And as North Carolina looks ahead, it does so standing on the foundation he helped lay steady, enduring, and hopeful. The news was confirmed quietly, without ceremony. Ike Schab, one of the last living witnesses to the attack on Pearl Harbor, had passed away at the age of 105. With his death, a living connection to one of the most defining mornings in modern history slipped into memory. Ike Schab was never someone who sought recognition. He did not describe himself as a hero. For most of his life, he simply called himself a sailor who did his duty. Yet history placed him at the center of a moment that reshaped the world, and he carried that responsibility for more than 8 decades. Born on July 4, 1920, Schab grew up during a time when service and sacrifice were part of everyday life. Like many young men of his generation, he joined the United States Navy with a sense of purpose, unaware of how quickly that choice would pull him into history. By late 1941, he was stationed at Pearl Harbor, surrounded by routine, discipline, and the quiet rhythm of military life. On the morning of December 7, 1941, that rhythm was shattered. The sound of aircraft engines cut through the calm. Explosions followed, smoke filled the sky. In a matter of minutes, the base was under attack and the world was at war. Schab later recalled the confusion of those first moments, the shock, the disbelief, the realization that this was not a drill. "You didn't think about fear," he once said in an interview. "You thought about surviving and helping the man next to you." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of lived experience. That morning changed everything. Lives were lost, ships burned. The United States was drawn fully into World War II for Schab. It marked the beginning of a lifelong role as a witness to history, whether he wanted it or not. In the years that followed, he continued his service like so many others of his generation. When the war ended, he returned to civilian life, carrying memories that could not be left behind. For a long time, he rarely spoke about Pearl Harbor. Like many veterans, he believed some experiences were meant to be held quietly. As decades passed, the world changed. New generations grew up far removed from the war. Slowly, Schab realized that his silence left a gap. History books could explain what happened, but they could not fully capture how it felt. He began to speak, not to relive the trauma, but to preserve the truth. Through interviews, school visits, and memorial events, Schab became a voice for those who could no longer speak. He never dramatized the events. He described them plainly, letting the facts carry their own weight. That honesty earned him respect across generations. One historian once said, "Men like Ike Schab are not just witnesses to history, they are its guardians." Schab understood that role deeply. He felt a responsibility to remember accurately, without anger or exaggeration, but with clarity and respect. As the number of Pearl Harbor survivors grew smaller each year, Schab's presence became even more meaningful. He stood at ceremonies where silence spoke louder than words. He listened as names were read. He bowed his head not for himself, but for those who never returned home. In later years, he often reflected on the passage of time. "I'm not special," he once said, "I just happen to still be here." That humility defined him. He never placed himself above others, even as people lined up to hear his story. Family members remember him as gentle and thoughtful, a man who valued quiet mornings and simple routines. One relative shared, he carried history with him, but he never let it harden his heart. That balance between memory and peace was something he worked toward for most of his life. Schab also believed strongly in remembrance as a form of respect. He worried that as first-hand witnesses disappeared, the meaning of Pearl Harbor might fade into abstraction. His goal was never to inspire fear, but understanding. War, he believed, should never be remembered casually. As he reached his later years, Schab became one of the last living connections to that December morning. Each interview felt heavier, not because the story changed, but because the responsibility grew. He was no longer one voice among many. He was among the final few when he passed away on December 20, 2025. Messages of tribute appeared across social media and veteran communities. Many thanked him for sharing his story. Others simply expressed gratitude for his service and his honesty. 1 message read, "Because of Ike Schab, my children understand that Pearl Harbor was not just a date, but a human experience." Another said, "He helped keep history alive without anger, only truth." These words reflected the quiet impact he had made. Schab's life reminds us that history is not only shaped by leaders and generals, but by ordinary people caught in extraordinary moments. He did not choose the moment that defined him. He chose how to carry it. He lived long enough to see the world. He fought for change many times over. He witnessed progress, division, remembrance, and forgetting. Through it all, he remained steady, committed to the idea that memory itself is a form of service. As one of the last Pearl Harbor witnesses, Ike Schab became a bridge between past and present. He connected generations not through spectacle, but through truth. His voice reminded us that freedom has a cost, and that remembrance is part of honoring that cost. Ike Schab will be remembered as a guardian of memory, a man who stood at the edge of history and carried its lessons forward with dignity. As time moves on, and first-hand witnesses fade, his story remains steady, clear, and enduring. And in that remembrance, his service continues. The confirmation came softly, carried first in quiet reports before spreading across newsrooms around the world. Peter Greg Arnett, the journalist who spent a lifetime standing where history unfolded, had passed away at the age of 91. For many, the news felt like the closing of an era when war was explained not through slogans, but through human voices. Peter Arnett was not drawn to journalism for comfort. He was drawn to it for truth. Born in 1934, he came of age during a time when the world was learning how fragile peace could be. From early in his career, he showed a willingness to go where others hesitated, believing that understanding required presence. That belief carried him to the front lines of the Vietnam War. While others reported from a distance, Arnett stayed close to the story. He listened to soldiers, civilians, and families caught between forces larger than themselves. His reports did not glorify conflict. They revealed it. Through nightly broadcasts and written dispatches, his words entered living rooms across the globe. Viewers did not just hear about battles, they heard about fear, loss, and uncertainty. War became personal, and that changed how it was understood. In 1966, Arnett was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for his reporting from Vietnam. The honor recognized more than bravery. It recognized balance. His work showed that journalism could be urgent without being cruel, and factual without losing humanity. A fellow reporter once said, "Peter didn't just describe war, he translated it for people who had never seen it." That ability became his signature. He explained complexity without removing emotion, and he did so under conditions few would accept. As the Vietnam War continued, so did the criticism. Some accused him of being too close to the story. Others claimed his reporting made people uncomfortable. Arnett accepted that discomfort as part of the job. He believed truth was not meant to be easy. After Vietnam, his career did not slow. He continued covering global conflicts, carrying the same calm tone into chaotic places. When the Gulf War began, his voice once again became familiar to millions. In a time of fast-moving headlines, Arnett remained measured. During the Gulf War, he reported from Baghdad, offering rare insight from inside a city under bombardment. His reports were watched closely, sometimes debated fiercely. Yet even critics acknowledged his commitment to accuracy. Arnett addressed the controversy simply. "My job was never to please anyone," he once said. "It was to report what I saw." That clarity guided him through decades of changing media landscapes and political pressure. What set Arnett apart was not just where he reported, but how he reported. He spoke with restraint. He avoided drama for its own sake. His calm delivery allowed viewers to absorb the gravity of events without being overwhelmed. Colleagues often described him as steady under pressure. One producer recalled, when everything around him felt chaotic, Peter's voice stayed calm. That calm made people trust him. Trust, more than fame, defined his career behind the scenes. Arnett was known as thoughtful and disciplined. He prepared carefully, respected local voices, and understood that journalism carried consequences. He did not forget that words could shape public understanding and policy. As media evolved, Arnett adapted without abandoning his principles. He worked across platforms and networks, always returning to the same core idea: be present, be honest, and be fair. He believed credibility was built slowly and lost quickly. In later years, he reflected on the changes he had witnessed. Wars ended, new conflicts emerged, technology transformed how news was delivered. Yet the human cost of conflict remained the same. That reality continued to guide his reflections. Arnett often spoke about the responsibility of journalists. If you are there, he once said, you owe it to people to tell it straight. That sense of duty never faded, even as his career spanned generations. Family members remember him as deeply committed, yet gentle in private life. He carried heavy stories, but he did not let them harden him. One relative shared, he believed understanding was a form of compassion. That belief shaped both his work and his character. As he aged, Arnett became a reference point for younger journalists. Many studied his reporting, not just for technique, but for ethics. He represented a standard that was increasingly rare, being close to power without serving it. Tributes following his passing reflected that influence. Fellow reporters spoke of courage and integrity. Viewers remembered how his reporting helped them understand distant conflicts in human terms. One message shared online read, "Peter Arnett didn't shout the news, he trusted us to listen." Another said, "He showed that telling the truth could be quiet and still powerful." Those words captured the essence of his legacy. Peter Greg Arnett passed away on December 17, 2025. His death marked the loss of a witness who stood at the edge of history and chose clarity over comfort. He did not chase drama. He carried responsibility. His work remains archived in footage, transcripts, and memory. But more importantly, it lives on in the standards he helped define. Journalism that values presence, reporting that respects humanity, truth told without fear. In a world where noise often overwhelms meaning, Arnett's career reminds us of the power of calm truth. He showed that standing close to history requires courage, patience, and care. Peter Greg Arnett will be remembered as a man who stood where history broke and made sure the world listened. His voice may now be silent, but the echoes of his work continue steady, human, and enduring. The confirmation came gently, shared first among close circles before reaching the wider world. Anthony Price, the designer whose vision reshaped how music and fashion spoke to each other, had passed away. The news felt like a quiet pause in a long, colorful story that helped define an era. Anthony Price did not begin his career seeking fame. He began with curiosity. Born in 1945, he came of age in a Britain that was changing quickly, where youth culture was challenging old rules and searching for new ways to express identity. Fashion for Price became a language, one that could say what words could not. In the creative underground of London, he found his voice. It was bold, imaginative, and unafraid of contrast. He believed clothing was more than fabric and form. It was emotion, attitude, and story. That belief guided every step of his work. As music and fashion began to merge in powerful ways, Price stood at the center of that meeting point. He became known not just for dressing performers, but for shaping how they were seen. On stage and on camera, his designs helped artists become something larger than themselves. His collaborations with David Bowie marked a turning point. Together, they explored identity, performance, and transformation. Price's designs did not follow trends, they created worlds. Each piece felt intentional, designed to support a character, not distract from it. Working with Brian Ferry and Roxy Music, Price further shaped the visual language of an era. Sharp tailoring met glamour, elegance, mixed with rebellion. The result was a look that felt both timeless and daring. One photographer who worked alongside him once said, "Anthony understood what the artist wanted to say before they said it themselves." That understanding became his strength. He listened closely, observed carefully, and designed with intention. Price did not believe in excess for its own sake. Even when his designs were dramatic, they were controlled, lines were precise, details were purposeful. He believed restraint could be just as powerful as spectacle. Behind the scenes, he was known as thoughtful and focused. He worked quietly, often letting the final image speak for him. Fame never seemed to interest him as much as craft. Those who worked with him recall long conversations about mood, movement, and meaning. As pop culture shifted through the 1970s and beyond, Price's influence spread. Designers who followed studied his work, not to copy it, but to understand it. He showed that fashion could be narrative, that clothing could carry emotion and memory. A younger designer once reflected, "Anthony taught us that style isn't about trends, it's about truth." That lesson became part of his lasting impact. He challenged others to think deeper, to design with purpose rather than speed. Even as styles changed, Price remained relevant because his work was rooted in ideas, not seasons. His designs appeared in photographs and performances that are still studied today. They captured moments when culture shifted, when identity was being redefined in public view. Despite his influence, Price remained grounded. He avoided self-promotion and rarely spoke about legacy. For him, the work was enough. If an image lasted, if a design helped tell a story, that was success. Friends recall his sharp eye and dry humor. He could be direct, but never careless. One longtime collaborator shared, Antony had a way of seeing the whole picture. He knew when something worked and when it didn't without ego. That clarity earned him trust. As years passed, Price became something of a quiet reference point. His name was spoken with respect in studios and classrooms alike. New generations discovered his work and recognized how deeply it had shaped modern visual culture. When news of his passing spread on December 16, 2025, tributes followed from across the creative world. Musicians, designers, and photographers shared memories and images. Many spoke not just of his talent, but of his understanding. One message read, Antony Price didn't just dress icons. He helped create them. Another said, his work taught us that style can hold history. These reflections echoed the truth of his career. Price's designs remain preserved in photographs, archives, and memory. They continue to speak, long after the moment they were created. They remind viewers of a time when fashion dared to ask questions about identity and expression. More than anything, Antony Price showed that style could be meaningful. That what someone wears can say something honest about who they are, or who they hope to be. He treated fashion as art and art as conversation. As the creative world reflects on his life, his absence is felt not as an ending, but as a pause. The images he helped create still move through culture, inspiring curiosity and courage. Antony Price will be remembered as a visionary who understood that style is not decoration, but history made visible. His work captured moments when culture changed shape, and his influence continues in every designer who believes clothing can tell a story. Though his hands no longer sketch or cut fabric, the world he helped design remains. And in that lasting presence, Antony Price's legacy lives on, elegant, fearless, and unforgettable.